Mahdy joins the podcast today, a people leader, customer focused executive on a mission to make an impact every day. Over the years, I've known Mona, one of my very first leaders in my career, actually. One of the things that always grabbed my attention was her extremely positive outlook and approach to life. I've asked Mona to join me today to talk about her journey, her leadership approach, and also some of the lessons that she's learned along the way. But don't take my word for it. Let's take a quick listen to some of what her team members had to say about her. So I recently reviewed her LinkedIn and I've grabbed some significant components that talk to her leadership style and her impact that she's made to individuals that she's served along the way. And I wanted to point out two specific ones. And the first one goes like this. Mona started the African journey with me. She was one of the first teammates to start this unknown journey. She built a team, motivated them, and delivered quarter on quarter, working in the most difficult markets of the world. She remained positive and delivered tremendous success to the organization that she represented. She's a dream manager, director, future VP in any organization that she works in. And the second one goes like this. When you talk woman leadership, innovation, and creativity, this is some of the traits that she's got. Saw her taking her career so serious with confidence, one step at a time, despite uncertainty and tough situations. She kept as a rock in face of all that, with decisions she would definitely be proud of, yet a hardcore fighter who would challenge all around herself to seek clarity. She saw her progressing steadily over the years and would always be proud of what she accomplished and still can accomplish. Each and every dialogue or situation that she discusses teases brains to think. Indeed, an inspiring woman, a great manager, and an all-around amazing mother. When you see the amount of care she offers to each and every one around her, you would know the absolute word of giving. This is Mona, who I've witnessed over the years. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. Long time coming.
Wow. Thank you, Rish, and thank you for reading these. You know, when you read them, when I read them myself, it sounds very different than hearing someone saying them out loud.
Pretty impressive. Look, I mean, it goes without saying, like, you were one of the very first and impactful leaders in my career. When I actually started off this leadership series, like, you're one of the first people that popped up in my mind. And so I'm glad, we finally got a chance to do it. And, I'm glad we got to do it now, because if we did it in my early days when I actually started doing this, I might not have been able to do justice all the great work that you've done that I've just described, right?
Oh, thank you.
I think to start off the conversation, I always love jumping into the early days. So maybe if you can share a little bit with me about the early days, your career path and how you've transitioned into the leadership roles that you are in today.
Yeah. Well, let me start. I think I will start by saying that leadership is not something that grows overnight, right? And it's definitely not something that we're born with. We do have a tendency to like serving people. If you have that, then you might want to read more and develop more your leadership skills, right? I think one of the main things to shift the way I thought about leadership is to understand this, is to understand that it's an act of service. It is not a role or a destination that you reach and you can stay there just because you got there already, right? So if I go back to the early days, I think with me, it started by being pushed actually in school by the principal to handle a couple of roles which I was very uncomfortable with, right? And maybe I'll go a bit further down. So I grew up in Egypt and then immigrated to New Zealand with my family, right? And there it was brand new culture, brand new accent. I understood the language, but I just couldn't figure out what some of the words or lingo means. And it was like, oh my God, yeah. And I think it takes people with developed leadership skills to identify those who have it and guide them and push them along that way, right? And I think that this is what happened with the principal in my school at the time, that she saw something that I didn't see at the time. So she put me in places where I could be, some of the prefects, roles that I took over, or at the time I was handling the library. I was making sure that everything is in line. Even though I wasn't a reader at that time, so for me it was a big question mark. Why do you want me to be the head librarian? There's a lot of other people who read a lot more than me. But then I understood, behind all of these different aspects and roles that people have in life, leadership plays a big role, right? And I think that this is where, I had to stand up in front of people in big auditoriums and speak. And that was scary at the first time. And then you start, asking yourself, why is it scary? So you start diving into understanding yourself. And that's another key thing that people have to focus on when they move into leadership, right? Is you need to do the inner work. You need to understand who you are before you can start guiding people to where they want to be.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so from there, when I moved on to university, I still kept that going, right? So I would always have like extracurriculum things that I'm doing that satisfy this part in me, which was discovered, I would say. Then, finished university, I studied something very different from what I'm doing now. I've always worked in the IT industry, but my studies were in biotechnology. And my focus at that time was purely genetics. I was fascinated by the Human Genome Project at the time, and I was hoping to have a part in that. But unfortunately, with the move back to the Middle East and coming back to Egypt, there was no chances for me to get there. And the next thing on my mind was applying technology to help the people, right? So that's where I came in to enter the IT industry.
Wow, so there's a lot in there, right? And some of it I want to double click on a little bit, right? And I think the first thing that I'm going to ask you, though, before I get into the overall leadership concepts that you talk about and the leadership description that you talked about, you mentioned something there about speaking in front of large audiences and not being good at it at the time, but then being able to transition and actually become good at it. Like, how did you overcome that challenge? I think that's a very common question these days, right? And there's a very common fear for a lot of people that's doing public speaking, myself included, right? It's always that nervousness and that, that fear of just not doing a good job. How did you overcome that fear?
I think the key, Rishan, in this is to really understand where that fear is coming from, right? I've read so many books and listened to so many podcasts about, how to overcome that fear. But if you don't figure out your own fear, you will never actually overcome it. You're still going to have the heavy breathing, or, the blood flowing, and you just kind of lose your voice, or you panic and can't talk at all. And it's a different fear for each and every individual, right? It could be just the fear of standing and having so many eyes stare at you. Or in my case, it was the fear of not being adequate enough in understanding what I want to say, right? So from there, that drove in me more time in understanding the topic that I want to talk on, right? It comes with no needed explanation that if you're going to stand in front of people and make an impact, it has to be driven from you believing in what you're saying. So if you don't have enough information about it, or you don't, you're not having a proper concept about what you want to say, it's very hard to transmit this to people and make an impact. They will hear you. It could be a very nice presentation, but they might not necessarily get anything out of it because there's no feeling attached to it. And in my case, this is one thing that I had to work on a lot is, I don't speak about topics that I don't want to say fully understand, because we can never capture all the knowledge in the world, but understand enough to make a link with me personally and with my values, so that at least when I'm saying something, I can back it up with, my feelings attached to it. And I think that this is what people get out of that. But there's a lot of fears. And again, I'll go back to the point of key in leadership is to really know yourself, right? Know yourself, know what makes you tick, know what you want to say to people, right? and then you capsule this together with the piece of information that you want to attach. But for every person, it's different. And I think it's really key that people spend time not only understanding, the topic or whatever it is that they're gonna speak about, but understanding what it means to them to speak about this.
It's really that sense of appreciation for the topic, but also being able to level that preparation into something that brings out your authentic desire to talk about a topic,
Correct.
right? And that's
Correct.
so important to be impactful in the topic that you're discussing. You talked about leadership earlier on, and you talked about being pushed as well in a new environment, in a new country, in terms of representing a group of people, probably establishing a vision or probably establishing a task that needed to be actioned upon. This might sound a little cheesy, but it's a fact. In my early 20s, when I met you, one of the things that I always remember about you, and this is a long time ago, obviously, because I've transitioned into a long career. One of the things that I always remember about you was your ability to be able to foster the trust, the teamwork, the collaboration between all of us as a unit to ensure that we were set up for success and we were doing the right things to better ourselves. And fostering that trust, that collaboration, and that teamwork is one thing. It's a key thing of leadership. But you've also had to do that with multiple different backgrounds, an extremely diverse crowd. I think there was at a point where every one of us was from a different country, right? I'd love to tap into that. And maybe if you can spend some time on talking about how do you foster that trust within the team, that collaboration, and then how do you even do that with such a diverse crowd and be intentional about the impact that you're having? Because I'm sure there's probably different situational leadership approaches that will have to be applied, right? So I'd love for you to tap into that a little bit.
Right. I'm going to try to say it as it is, and I'm sorry because I know that the question makes it seem like I have to give a very sophisticated answer. And in my views, it really goes back to us being human, right? And this is, I think, one of the key things that is part of my values that I always try to bring to any team that I work with, is that we do not forget that we're human. So when I had to be part of a team or had to actually build a team from scratch to handle so many different countries and different cultures and territories, I had to be mindful of how my team members are going to function in the region that they will handle, but also how I deal with them, right? And essentially going back to your question, building that one-on-one trust and that connection with each team member is something that we just can't shy away from and call ourselves a leader at the same time, right? Because if you don't know what drives a person, if you don't know what's important for them, they will never get up in the morning to run after the same vision that you want them to go for. So I think it's important to, split them, but they are also attached, right? So you can't have a team that's in sync with their leader if you as a leader don't understand each of them individually, what makes them tick, what makes them work, what are their downtimes, what annoys them, what's important in their life, because these are the drivers, right? And once you figure that out, you're very capable of playing the tone of the day or the weeks or uniting that vision between people, because you would be able to set up a link, let's say, between the vision and each individual's own drivers. And when people come together towards something like this and they feel like, whoever they are working with in a team understands them, it creates a synergy, right? It creates a synergy, because I'm able to say, for example, Rishan doesn't like this, and if I see it happening, I would be talking to the other person saying, you're not going to get the best out of your conversations with Rishan if you keep discussing in this way. So there was always a lot of background work that I was doing that the team might not have noticed, but it comes from each and every individual giving me that trust of opening up and letting me know who they are, what they value. And then it becomes my responsibility to make sure that this is respected amongst the other team members. once you have that and you have a vision that you can give a link, it doesn't have to be the same link. You know, one person could be working towards X, the other is working towards Y, but they are both driving in the same direction of that vision, just in different cars, right? So that link doesn't have to be the same, but it has to be there for a team to function in synergy and for a team to become successful, right? And I always, if you remember, I always refer back to, you know, football players, because on the field, they're very different. They do very different things. Their aim from this 90-minute is very united, but what they have to do to reach the aim is very different, right? The skills that they have to bring are very different. So I always say, especially, you know, especially in sales organizations, we have to realize that. We have to realize that each individual salesperson, sales manager, sales director, leader, you know, whatever it is, we have to realize that each of them will come with a whole lot of sales skills, and we have to find which ones will benefit the team and which ones will benefit the person, and you have to work on both.
Do you feel like you have to really find the balance in between leading with understanding every individual and in terms of what makes them tick and how they perform with results? Or do you feel like if you really put the emphasis and focus on that leadership, it will automatically drive results?
Ooh. Nice one, nice one. It doesn't automatically. I have to say, it doesn't automatically drive results. And I've had examples where I've had to have very tough conversations with some people, and, you know, not guide them towards a different role, but help them to see whether they actually fit here or not, whether it makes them happy to be here and give it the 150% or 200% that it requires, or they are, you know, they are fit somewhere else. So I think it's, you know, building that one-on-one trust is crucial, because then the person in front of you will also understand when you come and say, I don't think you're really happy doing this. Are you? You know, then they're free enough to open up and talk about what they like and what they dislike from the roles. And I've had team members who've left our team previously and gone off to do different kind of roles. They are still very successful. They carry a lot of the skills that they've built throughout the time with us, and that time spent in a high dynamic team, right? But they apply it in different roles that's making them happier, right? So driving results might not necessarily translate into dollar signs by building that one-to-one, but essentially, again, as a leader, you have to be always preserving this scope, right? Because yes, you're a people leader, but you're also a business leader. So you have to always keep an eye and, you know, magnifying glass on what's working for the business and what's not. And that it doesn't have to end in, you know, destroying any type of relationships. Right. As long as people are open enough to figure out their way, right? Because there's a lot of people who enter, you know, a specific role, and in the beginning they're doing good, and you know, after a while, maybe that pressure is not something they want to handle. And every type of role, I would say, and every type of function, business or outside of business, right? There is always pressure. It's just a different type of pressure, and each human being can handle pressure in a different way. It's not to say that someone who's not doing well in one area can't perform magnificently in another area. So again, you know, I would say, yes, it's crucial to know, but it is not a direct link to, you know, the success or the driven success of results. Yeah, it's not a direct link, but it has to be there. Otherwise, you will always be running with a few weaker links that might be blocking that success.
I once heard it say from a leader that I actually talked to, and I think it was more of a humorous statement, but the leader basically described that an element of driving result a result is actually helping somebody find the role that they might be a better fit for versus the role that they're in, right? That can be
Correct, correct,
classified as a result too, right? That's always an
correct.
interesting one, right? I want to talk about leadership. You've been leading for a long time. You've led multicultural environments. You've led businesses across various territories as well. I'm sure when you've taken on some of those roles, it had to be a competitive environment. It had to be a
Yeah.
competitive transition into you taking on some of those senior leadership roles. Can you talk to me a little bit about, how do you believe that has happened? Did you have to set up a platform, a brand for yourself? Did you have to
Oh,
demonstrate specific results? Well, share a little bit about that.
yeah. I think in the beginning it wasn't so obvious to me because I think and I don't want to say that it's a mistake of anyone, but it is just how life is, right? All the way down from when Darwin said, it's survival of the fittest. But I think that when we come in the business world, sometimes we forget to showcase our fitness, right? So we expect people to see it without being able to showcase it. So I think in the beginning of my career in leadership, I was highly dependent on the fact that others are going to see what I'm doing, um, without me being able to sort of communicate it in a way that they can use, right? And this is one of the shifts that I've had to make that later on propelled my career, right? Is that and I would say it honestly, I don't know if it's a piece of advice that anyone can benefit from, but I have my own journal where I document each and everything that I believe has resonated in success for my team or team members or myself. Because when we go through the days, if sometimes we forget what is it that we've done 10 years ago to bring us here. And when I go through this, it brings back such humbleness for me that this was not an overnight success. It was not something that just happened. And if somebody would come to talk to me about what they need to do, I have a reference of saying, these are things that you can look at and follow. And this is really important because, as I said in the beginning, we're not born as leaders. Nobody's born as a leader. First, you have to, know who you are, know your values, know your red lines, right? And then you have to figure out what is it that you love to do, like what function or industry or whatever, where you feel that you want to give your energy there. And then you have to be consistent in doing the work. So whether that work means I have to be having one-on-one with my team members, I can't ignore them for a while, even if I have to notice in their eyes when they walk into the office, or even now on Zoom, as soon as they turn on Zoom, if I see someone is just, it's not their day and I miss that and jump straight into business, I lose that credibility of being human, right? So it's important that we keep track of these things so that we also don't get a full head of ourselves and grow an ego of I'm all that. No, there was a lot of hard work, detailed hard work that had to go through in it. What this helped me to do is that later on, in situations where different roles were opening up and I wanted to put my hand up and say, I'm fit for it, I had something to showcase.
Nice.
Right? I didn't have to depend on, do you remember when I did this? It was more like I've got my own thesis written down about what I can do, what I can bring to the table, what change I can give.
It's really that I love how you've articulated that journaling approach, right? Just in terms of capturing all the value, but above and beyond value, just all the areas of impact that you've been able to be a part of and be able to be accountable for throughout your tenure, that pretty much serves as a platform for your next role and has elevated you along the way. I'm sure during that journey, as you've captured your value points, as you've captured your impactful points, there's been failures along the way.
100%.
Maybe,
And you
yeah,
have to
share.
capture those as well.
Sorry.
you have to capture those as well.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me a little bit about that. Like, how do you
Yeah.
deal with that as a leader? Maybe if you could point out one of your biggest failures as a leader and how you've been able to overcome that.
Um, I think, capturing your mistakes is crucial, because if you don't understand why they happen, you're going to continue doing them, right? So I think I analyze the areas where I go wrong more than I analyze where I went right? Just to understand what else do I have to work on as a person to be able to be fit, especially when these mistakes happen on a human to human relationship, not like a business issue, not like we drafted a contract in the wrong way, but when you really clash with a person, I think that this is one of the areas that really woke me up to this long time ago. Is that I thought, oh, fantastic, all my team, they like me and I like them and we're all in sync. And then I all of a sudden discovered that there is a person in the team who was not in line with that at all. Even though I was doing the same, but I was missing something. I was missing to understand the reality behind what they told me, what is important for them, right? So again, some people would fear to say the truth in situations where they're talking to their managers, for example. So it's really, again, I would take it up to the managers to understand, was it too early for me to ask that question? Was it too early for me to ask what motivates you, what really wakes you up? Because maybe they just gave me the textbook answer and I took it and ran with it as if it's the reality. So I think, this was one of the things that happened with me, and I had a team member who I discovered by chance was, crying drastically, and it was
Wow.
because of me. And then it really broke my heart, because putting everything else aside, I realized, I failed in a human to human relationship. So, but when you're very clear with yourself about the two things, the business and the people, you're able to step back and say, what is it that I did that caused this, and apologize for it, right? Because no matter what happens in business, people can follow through a path or part the way in different paths, but that relationship has to always be intact. And this is what I believe in, and what I discovered that day is that this is a higher value to me than anything else, right? So it's very important for me that this is not lost. And that person, again, now is very successful in the role that they're having. We're still in touch, we're still talking, and that situation is cleared out. But we had a good, honest, heart-to-heart sit down where we expressed why and how things went down that way.
Your honesty and your openness is extremely admirable, right? It takes a lot of courage to share a story that close to you. So thank you so much for taking the moment to talk about that. One of the things that I'm super curious about, and I'm sure my wife is as well, you're a very impactful leader, responsible for many countries, many people. How do you find the balance between personal and professional life? Because you really apply that intentionality with your team, learning about your team, prioritizing one-on-ones, understanding what makes them tick, taking the situational leadership approach across all the different individuals that you represent. Talk to me a little bit about the balance, and are you making sacrifices?
Look, sacrifices, yes, you have to make sacrifices both ways. You have, I mean, and it's natural in life, right? If you want to go to watch a movie, but your toddler is at home, you're making a sacrifice, right? If you want to step out to go to work or a work event, and your family is celebrating something, that's a sacrifice. And vice versa. Sometimes you sacrifice work to go and attend a kids event, right? And I think that I read a book long time ago, and in the book it mentioned, and it was a book written mainly for women leaders, and they were talking in it about how we need to stop thinking about finding work-life balance, right? And that really resonated with me and really changed how I look at things. Um, it's life, right? Like it's me, Mona, and this is all my life, my team members, my business, my responsibilities at work, and my responsibilities at home, and my husband and my children and my family, my parents, my sibling. That's all me. I cannot separate them. I can't say from this hour to this hour every day is focused for this, because sometimes something could pop up like a dentist appointment, and it might be more important to take that than attend a work function, right? So you have to play things around in a very holistic way when it comes to creating that balance, to be able, I think, in my perspective, to be able to give everything the right level of energy that it deserves. So for me, there were times, and I'm sure you'd remember, but there were times that I had teams looking after territories that the weekends was a Thursday, Friday, others was Friday, Saturday, and others was Saturday, Sunday, and it was a whole mess, for me. So 7 days a week, I had team members working. And it was from that time that I felt like, okay, if it's my weekend or my day off and I'm with my kids out, that doesn't mean I can't take a 5-minute call to see the urgent matter that this team member who's currently working needs to understand or talk about. And that gave that gave me the balance I need. So when we talk about balance, I think again it's very personal, but for me it's that this is the balance I need. So now even when we are back behind Zoom, my children would walk in from school, I know that timing, and I will excuse myself just to say hi, give them their hug and kiss, and then back, right? So it's understanding your own balance so that you're not sitting in a meeting, but your brain is somewhere else. Or you're at the mall with your children or taking them to a play area, but you're calculating targets and budgets and all that. So balance for me is, creating that zone, the proper zone of time that you allocate to each thing you're doing with your full energy.
Is it safe to translate that in a way where I can say that you strive to be the hardest working person in the room, but in every room, with your family, with your friends, with your work?
I'm not the hardest working person, but I would say that I enjoy. I enjoy what I do, and I enjoy the time that I spend with my family, my friends, my kids. So I don't mix so that I can get full satisfaction. Might be very selfish of me also, but it's working. But when I go sit with a friend, I put my phone down, because I could sit with that friend for half an hour, have a coffee, and say, all right, let's meet again later, because we've both satisfied from the energy we've passed on in that half an hour, versus 2 hours where the majority of the time we're saying a couple of things and then back on our phones, checking business, right? So to me, it drills down to, how far are you willing to share energy between things, in multitasking, and get no satisfaction out of things.
I got it. And so it's really being able to focus, but be in the moment, I guess, in the
Exactly.
moment of the moment, right? Yeah, that's really well summarized. Thank you. I think moving on to maybe how we can end this is, when you think about the journey further down the line, long after now, when the coil is burnt out and the leadership journey is ended, what is it, the one thing you want to be known for?
Well, first of all, I don't think leadership journeys end, right?
Great answer.
I honestly believe that there is no destination to it, because if you really view it as an act of service, then if it's not business, if you're not servicing the people to gain results in a business, you could be servicing your family to gain results in, developing little human beings who will grow to have, proper relationships with others. So that leadership journey doesn't end. It's just, where the topic takes you might be different though.
Right, right.
I think for me, the one thing that I want to be remembered for is actually to be remembered by the people that I worked with on a human level, not on whatever function we were working on. So I think, one of the things that really warm up my heart is when people reach out to me and we've worked together like 15 years ago and they say, oh, look at what I'm doing now. I started this business, or I'm doing this, or, here's a picture of my kids. And these things just go far and beyond for me from anything else, because we gather together for a vision, for a mission that we achieve. But beyond that, we still should be gathered, right? So I think this is one of the things that would be top of my mind, is that people remember me as the human.
What a place to leave it. It's been lovely talking to you. Thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for sharing the level of context that you have and the personal stories and the journey along the way as well. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And I have to say that I'm very proud. I'm very proud of this, because when you first told me about it, I'm like, oh, nice. Will he actually have any time to do this? But you're taking it to the next level, definitely. And I feel like there's a lot of important messages and topics that you're discussing, a lot of insights that people will gain out of listening to all of the different podcasts.